All right.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. Everyone, welcome to the Rental Housing Committee meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the State of California Executive Order N-29-20, dated March 17, 2020. All members of the Rental Housing Committee are participating in this meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the meeting live may do so at mountainview.legistrar.com, on YouTube at mountainview.gov/YouTube, and on Comcast Channel 26. As noted on the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral comments during the public comment period for an item by signing up at mountainview.gov/RHC_speakers, or by phone by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering webinar ID 937-7306-8363. Any emails received by 5 p.m. today were forwarded to the Rental Housing Committee. Emails received after 5 p.m. will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. Now I will proceed with roll call. Committee member Julian Pardo-Dizella.
Present.
Committee member Nicole Haynes-Livesay.
Captain right here.
Present.
Meadows.
Committee member Matthew Grunwald.
Here.
Committee member, Vice Chair Susan Allman.
Howdy.
And I am here. So we will continue to the next item, minutes approval. So 3.1 is approve the minutes for the February 22nd, 2021 RHC meeting. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raised hand button on Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will keep time and announce when 1 minute remains. Seeing none, I'm bringing it back to the committee. So a motion to approve should include reading the following items. Approve the minutes for the February 22nd, 2021 RHC meeting. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Quote,
I will second the motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion and a second. A motion by Vice Chair Allman, a second by Committee Member Nicole Haynes-Livesay. Andrea, do you mind doing the roll call vote?
We'll start with Committee Member Pardo-Dizella.
Aye.
Committee Member Haynes-Livesay.
Aye.
Committee Member Grunwald.
Aye.
Vice Chair Allman.
Aye.
Chair Ramos.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously, 5 votes to 0.
All right, now our next item, item 5, oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on non-agenda items? If so, please click the raised hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will keep time and announce when 1 minute remains. Seeing none. Moving forward to item 8.1, mobile homes and rent stabilization. And we have a staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Ramos. Mobile homes and rent stabilization is not a new topic for the Rental Housing Committee. And today we would like to give an update on the policy context of mobile homes and rent stabilization in Mountain View and consider a path for providing tenant protections for mobile home residents, something we've been talking about in the Rental Housing Committee for the past 2-3 years. A little bit of background for completeness sake. In December of 2016, the CSFRA was adopted and effective. And soon after, the discussion started up whether or not mobile homes would also be covered under the CSFRA. And in February of 2018, the Rental Housing Committee decided mobile homes were not covered. A court action was filed in April of 2018 by mobile home residents. And in August of that year, the court upheld the rental housing decision, upon which the residents filed an appeal. And this past December in 2020, the appeal affirmed the court's decision. A little overview of other action or meetings held on this topic. In May 21 in 2019, the City Council adopted a work plan item, including potentially develop a rent stabilization for mobile homes. And in January of 2020, that was followed up by a study session in the City Council, and it gave direction to staff to reach out to stakeholders. The Rental Housing Committee also discussed this topic on February 10 in 2020. This was under the cover of reviewing potential changes to the CSFRA, and the Rental Housing Committee at that time provided input on these potential changes and supported a separate ordinance for mobile homes. Then in February and March of 2020, staff held stakeholder meetings and surveys were distributed among the residents and park owners. And that brings us to the next study session in September of 2020, where the Rental Housing Committee again received an extensive overview of the issues at stake. And now I would like to give the floor to Patricia, who initiated the surveys and is responsible for this overview that is an attachment to the Rental Housing Committee memo of today.
Thank you, Anki. Good evening, committee members. In early 2020, March 2020, city staff mailed surveys to all mobile home residents, and the survey could also be completed online through SurveyMonkey. We received 385 household responses, and this represents a 32% response rate. As you can see here, it was distributed to all 6 mobile home parks, representing 1,130 mobile homes. And the responses are as follows. So of respondent households, 16% have members who are under 18, 57% have members who are 65 or over, 13% have members who are veterans, 23% have members with a disability, and 21% have members who are unable to work. Income-wise, household income is as follows. 84% of households make less than $100,000 annually compared to 35% in Mountain View. 49% of households make less than $50,000 compared to 17% in Mountain View. 48% of households rely on a fixed income, and 40% of households with at least one member who is 65 or older rely on a fixed income. 39% are single person households. 86% own their own mobile home. 70% have lived in their home for more than 5 years. This indicates that this community is very stable. 86% of homes are double wide in size, and 99% of households pay for at least one utility in addition to rent or space rent. And as we've mentioned before, there are a few parks that allow for renters and not just owners. So there are people who pay rent for their home, and that covers the space rent. So that is why there's a differentiation there. We received responses from both mobile home owners and from people who rent their mobile home. On average, space rent in the mobile homes for people who own their mobile homes is $1,124. And 92% of our respondents received a space rent increase from 2015 forward. 31% of these respondents pay a mortgage in addition to space rent, which averages $1,053 a month, and 84% pay property taxes or DMV fees in addition to space rent annually at an average of $845 a year. Also, they pay for insurance on their homes. So as you can see, if you're on a fixed income, these expenses can really start to add up. And then renters who responded, we received 30 household responses from people who rent their home. On average, their rent is $2,916 a month, although it went up as far as high 3,000s, low 4,000s a month. 70% received an increase since 2015, and this represents 12% of our survey households. 45% of renters have lived in their home for more than 5 years. And that is the overview of the survey results. Anki, I'm going to hand it back over to you now.
Thank you so much, Patricia. It looks very effortlessly, but believe me, there was a lot of work tallying up all the services and making a nice presentation out of the data that was received. And we commend all the mobile home residents that sent in their surveys. I think that was a very high response rate that we received. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in the February 10, 2020 meeting, to go into more detail of what the Rental Housing Committee decided, they discussed that they were in favor of mobile home residents receiving similar protections as tenants covered by the CSFRA, and that they envisioned a separate program geared towards mobile homes, which would then better facilitate an effective and efficient implementation of mobile home rent stabilization. And then that the Rental Housing Committee also expressed that they are willing to collaborate with City Council and willing and able to administer a mobile home rent stabilization ordinance, provided that adequate funding is provided. Then last week, the City Council held a study session on March 16th, and this study session was held to provide input on a draft vision, strategic properties, and potential projects that would be incorporated as part of the city's strategic plan. And one of the discussion items was rent stabilization for mobile homes. So all council supported the staff's recommendation for the city to develop a mobile home rent stabilization ordinance modeled after the CSFRA and administered by the Rental Housing Committee, and to include this project as part of the city's strategic plan. What would be the fiscal impacts? Of course, today's discussion and deliberation has no fiscal impact, but administration of an ordinance would increase overall expenditures. To date, the CSFRA program funding is based on 100% cost recovery through the annual fees that we leverage to the landlords. In case mobile home rental housing fee will be charged, similar to that of the current rental housing fee, the increase in funding may cover increased expenditures. And as an example, if we're talking about 1,130 mobile home spaces and we take this year's rental housing fee of $85 per unit, would result in an added revenue of $96,050. So the questions before the Rental Housing Committee today are, does the Rental Housing Committee support the decision of Council to develop a city mobile home ordinance to be modeled after the CSFRA and to be administered by the Rental Housing Committee, provided there is adequate funding available? And the second question would be, does the Rental Housing Committee wish to provide initial input to the council regarding the development of such mobile home rent stabilization ordinance and or the administration of this ordinance? This concludes today's presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions from committee members? Oh, we have one from Vice Chair Alman.
I was just wondering, and I think I know the answer to this, but does the action of the council mean that we cannot proceed on our own to develop? I mean, we have the regulations. Would it be possible for us to speed up the process and go ahead and implement those regulations ahead of the council?
Karen, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, certainly. There's nothing that would preclude the RHC from taking action on its own. As we've discussed in the past, you could adopt regulations that would cover mobile homes. There are some issues with that. They might be more complicated than if the city were to adopt a separate ordinance. But there isn't anything that prevents you from taking action if the city doesn't take action. If you take action and then the city takes action, then we're going to have to figure out, you know, which really covers mobile homes, because we can't have two regulatory restrictions on mobile homes. That's not going to work.
And that's why we put the question in front of you today, to coordinate the city council's reaction and the rental housing committee's reaction. So we're not doing parallel things at the same time.
So are you asking for us to support the council's strategic plan for this? I mean, or are we saying we would like to advise them and give input on the regulations?
Actually, I ask both. First of all, do you agree with what the city council expressed in last week's meeting, that they would like to take on developing a separate ordinance? And if the answer is yes, would you like to give them some initial thoughts or input on that ordinance that they're going to develop? Or do you have already any specific ideas about how you would like to administer, if and how you would like to administer such an ordinance? This will not be your only time to be able to provide input. This is just, I hope we're going to be involved in every step of the way. So there will be opportune times for you to keep providing input. But since we asked a question, we might just consider if there are any initial thoughts on your side.
Vice Chair Alman, are you done with your questions?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Next, we have committee member Haynes Livesay.
Regarding giving input, assuming that the RHC decides we would like to administer any program that the council comes up with, which would be cool, would there be opportunities to do things like joint study sessions or joint planning sessions or a retreat or something where we get to be a little bit more actively involved, understanding that we're not an advisory board, not an advisory committee, but get to have a little bit more dialogue with council beyond how we have in the past, where we write letters or send over commentary?
Mm-hmm. That is all to be considered. I think if you look at the practicality of it, whose meeting is it? Is it a city council meeting where they can make decisions? Is it a rental housing committee where the rental housing committee makes decisions? So all of that needs to be developed moving forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Committee members Grunwald, Part of the Zella. Any questions on your end?
Well, I mean, this is Julian. So maybe to Susan's point, it might be helpful if there's a straw poll or there's some kind of understanding as to whether we're.
Can't hear you.
You're cutting out.
I'm sorry, can you hear me okay now?
Better.
Okay, so just as to Susan's point, I don't know if it would be useful if we had some kind of straw poll or other understanding as to whether we intend to take any sort of action separate and independent from the city council, because I think that's one of the issues that's being raised here. Are we essentially going to not do anything as to mobile homes until the city's taken action, or is there a chance or a possibility that a majority of this committee is going to want to do something, and then that's probably significant for the city council to know because it affects how they proceed?
Yeah, and I hoped that would be answered by answering that first question. If you positively react to that question, yes, we want to have it developed by city council, and you're suggesting maybe add to that while that process is in place, the rental housing committee will not take separate action? Yeah, okay.
So maybe I'll just go out on a limb here, or just keep talking on this point since I brought it up. But in my mind, I think that the city council they're taking a lead on this now. I would be in favor of taking a step back with the understanding that they are proceeding to take action. And I would not be in favor of trying to accomplish something independently on our own now, because I think that might muddy the waters and make it more difficult for anything to be accomplished if we're, it's almost like too many cooks in the kitchen. So that would be my take on this issue.
Committee member Grunwald, you're up.
Just point of order. I think we would have opinions during deliberation, but if this is the question period, maybe we, ask the questions, then public comment, and then I think some of the questions that Julian asked were good questions, but I'd leave it till deliberation.
Okay. A couple quick questions. Do we have any more sense of the timeline from council yet? Last I heard rumors of August.
Yeah, so the recommendation of the city to the city council was to be taken up in August, September, and that timeline has not changed as far as I'm aware.
And we have a general assumption that because you still are city staff, you can still work with the city to help with a number of these items. Is that correct?
Yes, that will certainly be the case.
Particularly with legal counsel, it's not that I want to just throw Miss Karen at them, but if Miss Karen's okay with that, that would be great.
Yeah, so
I think the city has outside legal counsel as well that they'll use.
All right. Do we have any other questions from committee members? Seeing none, we're going to move on to public. Do you have one more question, Vice Chairwoman?
Well, this may be under question number 2, but since so much work was already put into developing preliminary regulations, I would think it would be helpful to council if they had those basic regulations to work from, so they don't have to start, developing that on their own. Is that something we can do, is to forward the work?
Yeah, we'll do all we can to help and assist in getting this ready, for sure.
I guess to add on to Vice Chair Almond's question, there's nothing stopping us individually as committee members from reaching out to the council, correct?
Right. You're free to reach out.
All right. Do we have any other questions from the committee to staff? before we go to public comment? Going once, going twice. We are now going on to public comment. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raised hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will keep time and announce when 1 minute remains. I'm going to give 3 minutes. And it looks like we have a few hands up. So we're going to start with Tim Larson.
Hi, everyone. This is Tim Larson, president of the Mountain View Mobile Home Alliance. And first, I want to thank city staff for that excellent presentation, as usual, and all the hard work that went into that survey. I wanted to express our support for the RHC playing a supporting role to council. As you have heard from your legal advisory staff, the council has more leeway to provide coverage, not just to mobile home owners, but also to mobile home residents. And we think that this would be a great path forward for the RHC to collaborate with the city council taking the lead. We also want to express that we would like the RHC to provide clear direction about what sort of modifications could be easily made to the CSFRA that would still not add significant administrative burden. Specifically, this would be cost of living adjustments for fixed income or elderly residents in mobile homes, things of that nature that you feel like the city council should have they should have leeway to make these modifications to improve on rent stabilization and help protect some of the vulnerable residents of mobile homes would be great. Thank you, everyone, and we look forward to working with you as we move forward with this endeavor. I yield my time.
Thank you, Tim Larson. Next up, we have Molly Clancy. Oh, she disappeared. Or not. Yes, there we go.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi there. Thanks everyone for the great discussion. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to plus one things that Tim was saying. Us mobile home residents are very, very, very keen to get this ordinance done, and we definitely want to leverage both the work that's already been done by all the amazing staff members in the previous months and years. And as well, we want to make sure that it's something that is, beneficial for the mobile home park residents. So yeah, we just ask that we can cooperate really closely with the city and be able to get this done by the time frame that was allotted. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly. Next up, we have Anna Marie Morales.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank staff in the RHC for all of their hard work. The mobile home community greatly appreciates it. Mobile home residents have been wrongfully denied protections for far too long, and we're hopeful, especially based on City Council's meeting last week, that we have their support and the support of the RHC, so we will finally feel safe. Thank you for doing your job and finally protecting us. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Marie. Next, we have Edie Keating.
Hello. I am thrilled that this is moving forward, and as a member of the community who does not live in mobile home parks, but has been watching this issue progress, I'm sure I speak for hundreds, if not thousands, who are very happy that rent protections for mobile home parks are going to be moving forward. I'm just thinking back to the early days of the CSFRA and what was very time consuming in the initial months of that. And one aspect was determining the fair rate of return calculation. Now, because this committee, if you will be also administering the mobile home ordinance that council will pass, you may move much more quickly through those conversations. But another option that you might recommend to council would be to add more specific, you know what I mean, in the ordinance itself. Perhaps specifying the MNOI calculation and maybe with an alternate of a capital improvement mechanism, so that those decisions are more set in advance and less subject to interpretation further down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edie Keating. Next up, we have Mountain View resident.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to staff for your efforts on this, and I wanted to give the RHC some input. I think on question number one, the obvious answer is yes. You enthusiastically want to support an ordinance for mobile home residents. I want to give you some input because question number two requested some input. The first is on the issue of renters versus owners. I think it's very important that the RHC makes clear to council that you have people that own their mobile home and you have people that rent their mobile home, and both constituencies need protections. The vocabulary that has been used by staff and in the recent study report specifically talked about space rents. And I want everyone to be aware that that's only part of the picture. And we need to make sure that we cover both people that rent their home and people that own their home. I'm not intimately involved with all the details and nuances of the CSFRA, but I think it's really important that we have strong eviction protections for mobile home residents, those that live in mobile homes. And also the current proxy that you use for the cost of living adjustment is really problematic. If you go to Patricia's data, you can see there's a lot of people on fixed income, a lot of seniors, a lot of people have been in their homes for a long time. If you use a 4% COLA, people's rents are going to double every 17 years. And for people on Social Security, that's just not sustainable. So we need a more acceptable COLA. The other issue I want to bring up is we have this window now, right? So it's out in the press, it's out in the community. We're going to get protections, but now we have to wait until September. And who knows what landlords are going to do over the next 5 months. So I'd ask you guys to look at a possible emergency freeze or some sort of emergency protections while we're waiting for this ordinance, which, by the way, hundreds of cities in California have already implemented. So it's not like we're building anything from scratch here. If we could get some protections in the interim while the ordinance is being developed, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mountain View resident. Next up, we have B. Hansen.
First, I'd like to thank Mountain View resident for those extensive comments. They were really great. And I want to thank Anki van Dersen and Patricia Black for that incredible report. The Patricia Black's report in particular, it was so ironic when I saw those numbers because those match the informal surveys that we've done at Mountain View Mobile Home Alliance. We long ago estimated the numbers of seniors plus disabled people plus vets, and I think something like 80%, which, you know, it tells you that the population of the mobile home parks is very challenged in terms of income. So I really appreciate the Ms. Black and Ms. Van Derzen crunching that data so effectively and giving us so much information. I also really was interested in Committee Member Almond's and Hinslavsky's comments. It indicates to me that there is some enthusiasm on your committee to really work with City Council on that, and I appreciate that. And I appreciated Mr. Pardo's DeZella's comments as well as not muddying the waters. I think that's a very good consideration to think about. And so I want to remind you the last time that we spoke about this in a huge forum was June 1st, 2020. That was kind of an infamous meeting. And now we had maybe dozens of people speaking up at that meeting. And the enthusiasm has not waned among mobile home residents. So I thank you for starting this journey, and I'll be interested to see and hear what progress you make in the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, B. And last up, we have Alexander Brown.
All right. Hey, friends. Oh, boy, this feels good. Just give me a second to savor this. Yeah, that's good. As you can probably guess, I'm a very hopeful fella. I've been keeping the faith for years, trusting that with time and persistence, we in the mobile home community could feel secure in our homes one way or another. I imagined it coming earlier than this, but hey, better late than never. It feels trite, but I'm honestly super grateful to the efforts of staff and their outreach and analysis on this issue. I appreciate the hard work all of you do, not just for us, but for all of Mountain View. Thank you. Given how much you've been able to accomplish with the current funding, I'd love to see what you could do with better financial support, from a bunch of new units. Susan, I love the initiative. It'd be so much faster that way. And, I'm down with that. Nikki, I would love to watch or maybe participate in a joint RHC City Council session. That sounds like a great idea and a good time. I think that could be very productive. For this item and the questions posed, though, I'd like to encourage the committee to support and cooperate with the City Council in developing a mobile home ordinance. And I would also ask that you encourage the Council to keep the structure as close as possible to the CSFRA for administrative ease to provide at least the minimum protection afforded to other renters in Mountain View. There are some peculiarities with the mobile home community that could be addressed in this ordinance, but for the rent stabilization aspect and for the administration thereof, I think equal coverage covers it pretty nicely for now. If the council wants to give us stronger protections now, like an AGA more in line with the average income increase for many residents on fixed income, and then use a ballot initiative to bring the whole city up to that level, I wouldn't complain about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Alexander Brown. And we have no more comments. Just checking, no more hand raises. Great. All right, we're bringing it back to the committee. So we have our first question. Do you want to share the screen again for the covering of the questions? And then we can just go down and what everyone thinks. All right, so we have question number 1. Who wants to go first? If no one wants to go first, I'm going to pick someone. All right, committee member Haynes-Lipsey.
I'll go first. I think, yes, we support that. I would say we should support the decision of council to develop the mobile home ordinance to be mostly modeled after the CSFRA. I have some thoughts on that for question number 2, and to be administered by the RHC, ideally with some funding in the same mechanism that we get funding for our current units.
All right. Who's next? I'm going to call on committee member Pardo DeZella. Let's go.
Yeah, I think I would just agree with what Nicole said and leave it at that.
All right. Next, we have committee member Grunwald.
Sure. I'm a yes on number 1. I mean, this has been our opinion and our goal for a while, and glad to see it come to fruition. I think my main question or concern there is similar to what committee member Zella mentioned. Is there anything that any mechanism we have with teeth to secure this decision in a way that any further discussion of this item between now and when City Council makes a determination could have legal ramifications or could delay council. So I would be an emphatic yes on this, but maybe my question is to Karen, maybe I mean, is there any way to lock down this period from now until August or until the City Council makes a decision? And if, the City Council does not make a decision, maybe there are other mechanisms, but wanted to hear your take.
So are you asking, is there any way to protect the mobile home tenants until the council makes the decision?
No, more to with authority say that this is our preferred path.
I mean, the only thing I could, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think the original intent of the original decision, I think we mentioned, if I remember correctly, we had a couple different study sessions on this item. This is the initial big decision, I think, back in 2016, 17. And at first we had said, we're not going to take action to write these regs or to accept these regs because of some of the conflicts. And the public asked that we specifically say no, that we do not believe it's covered, so that it could be final, because if we didn't make a decision, we just kind of left it out there, right? So I guess now, is there any more than we could do other than saying just yes in today's meeting, to say again, reemphasize, we do not believe that it's covered under the CSFRA, but are very supportive of City Council making this decision?
I don't think you need to reiterate your prior decision. If you want to put more emphasis on your decision, I suppose you could say you support the council developing a mobile home ordinance. But if one isn't adopted, you would reconsider your decision in some period of time. Because I guess what I'm hearing, at least from the public, is some concern about how long this might take. But you don't really have any authority to do anything more than that in terms of the council and their actions. So, your authority rests solely with, you do have the ability to reconsider your decision.
Thought I'd ask. To the chair's question, I'm a yes on number 1 and number 2. Number 2, I could also discuss some specifics. Maybe, I'm not sure how you'd like to address that, but yeah, I'd have some input.
Oh, I was going by one question at a time, but we can address number 2 once we do our second round. But I'm going to pop it back because I think committee member Haynes Livesay might have a direct response.
Actually, I have a question.
Oh,
but I mean, it can be a response. So Matt, are you trying to say you'd ideally like us to say that we support the decision of council to develop the ordinance, and that we won't re-agendize our own draft regulations until after XYZ date? Is that kind of what you're looking for a comfort point of view?
Yes, I think that's one option. I mean, I think that's an interesting option. But yeah, just to, again, provide clarity, there will, who knows, there could be changes on council, there could be changes, there may be changes on the RHC. And I think that clarity in the past, any uncertainty, I think has caused delay. So I mean, my goal would just be provide certainty as much as possible, but sounds like I don't know if I'd go so far as to say something like accept regs and then say can only be repealed before some date with a 4/5 vote or something like that. Sounds like that's not an option according to Karen. But yeah, I mean, hopefully everyone's operating in good faith, and we, with this decision, provide the certainty the council needs to go forward.
Okay, cool. That was my question. Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Allman, your answer for question number 1.
Well, I would support the council developing a mobile home ordinance, but only if it's a clean ordinance. I don't want there to be loopholes for certain owners to opt out. So I guess that may be part of question 2. And as far as what Matt said, it seems to me that the courts actually made it clear that it could be quite legitimate for us to cover mobile homes. That they did not say it was illegal for us to provide coverage, as far as I know. Is that right, Karen?
Yes, so the court decision was essentially that it was within your discretion to take the decision that was made in 2018, and you have similar discretion to change that decision, that the CSFRA left that decision up to you as to whether mobile homes are covered or not covered.
Okay, so that is an option. I feel strongly that we should do whatever we can to facilitate this mobile home ordinance. And what concerns me is that a lot of politicking will get involved, and there might be pressure from owners to leave them loopholes so that they don't have to provide this coverage to residents. So I'm hoping that we would really provide a very structured response to the council and give them input on how we would see those regulations going forward.
I think you can address that under question 2. Yeah.
Right.
All right, that's the 4 committee members. And so my answer for question number 1 is yes, and please do it as fast as possible.
Yes.
Let's get them protected. So now we're going to move on to question 2. Does the RHC wish to provide initial
Actually, would you want to make a motion for question number 1?
Okay, let's do, who wants to make the motion? All right, I'll make the motion. I move that the RHC supports the decision of the council to develop a city mobile home ordinance to be modeled after the CSFRA and to be administered by the RHC, provided that there is adequate funding available. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by committee member Nicole Haynes-Livesay. Andrea, do you want to do a roll call vote for us?
All right, so we're going to start with committee member Pardo DeZella.
Aye.
Committee member Haynes-Livesay.
Aye.
Committee member Grunwald.
Aye.
Vice Chair Almond.
Aye.
Chair Ramos.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously, 5 votes to 0.
Woohoo! All right, question number 2. Y'all are ready for this. Who wants to answer first? If no one volunteers, I will call on someone. Okay. Committee member Pardo DeZella.
So, I think that our debate and discussion on this point is, of course, a part of the public record, and City Council has all of those materials available to them. So, I think, I don't know how helpful our input would be beyond what's already in the public record, where we've really discussed this issue significantly. I understand that there might be some nuances that some of the participants who've called in have brought up, as well as other members on the RHC, some concerns about loopholes, and maybe there's some specific points that we might want to provide some input on. But I think in terms of the big picture, I think that's the city council is very well equipped to take on this task on its own with information available to it without a whole bunch of input from us.
Thank you, committee member Partizella. Anyone, any next person before I call on another person? You guys just want me to call on you. All right. Vice Chair Almond.
I think it would really be helpful if we could forward the regulations that were developed by Karen and staff so that they aren't having to start from scratch. I think it's really key. We got pretty far into those developed regulations, and I see no reason why the council has to use a whole lot of staff time to develop that structure. So my suggestion would be to keep the recommendations very clear and also absolutely not given out to the owners of the properties. Anki is looking confused. What I meant is I should be more specific. The mobile home park owners, those that actually own the entire mobile home parks, should not have the option to opt out of rent stabilization. So the ordinance should be developed very clearly so that residents really can't feel secure and have a sense that they're going to be covered on a consistent basis without, the threat that an owner might suddenly say, well, sorry, we're not doing that.
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying is you do not like to see the option of regulate, say an ordinance, but then for park owners that comply with regular rules, they can just use a long-term lease and not be subject to the ordinance. Is that the option that you're talking about? Okay.
Exactly. It should be consistent through all the parks and not give the park owners the chance to muddy the waters.
Anything else, Vice Chair Almond?
Well, I would like to know from Karen whether those regulations that were developed for us could be forwarded to council and city staff so that they don't feel, we have to put it in a light in which they would accept these recommendations, but I certainly think that it could be a time saver if they were to see that, well, we've already gone through these steps and we could provide structure for the council.
We certainly can provide them to them. They're a public document. They were presented to the RHC in 2018. I don't know how helpful they will be because those regulations were really fitting mobile homes into our existing regulations. There's some things that I can work with Anki on this a little bit that might be useful for the city to think about. But for the most part, I think the city is probably going to start maybe with the CSFRA and conform that to mobile homes. That might be, given their direction that it's modeled after the CSFRA. But certainly we'll take a look at it and see if there's anything useful.
Good.
Is that it? Vice Chair Almond?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'd like to get consensus from the committee that we are looking for a clean ordinance.
Does anyone want to weigh in on that? Committee member. Oh, I see a hand up. I did see a hand up from committee member Grunwald, but then the hand went down. So,
Nicole can go.
Okay.
Well, I was trying to wait to talk because I'm going to be annoying and talk a lot. If you want to go first, Matt, that's totally fine.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So regarding the clean ordinance, I'll start there. I think what I'm understanding a clean ordinance to mean is no model lease, no opt-out clause for, park owners who maybe are not the ones that are viewed as the most abusive or the ones that are viewed as charging the highest rent. With regards to that, I do think that our administrative cost burden goes down significantly if we have one program. If we're going to say, well, for this group, we have a model lease, and for this group, we have a memorandum of understanding, and then for this group over here, we have a rent stabilization ordinance, I think just from an economy and scale point of view, that's going to be a nightmare to administer because you have to figure out okay, do they fall in bucket 1, 2, or 3? For bucket 1, here's all the sub rates. Here's bucket 2's all the sub rates. I think that gets unwieldy. So I would agree that I think we need one regulation. It covers all mobile home owners, all mobile home renters, meaning if you rent your space or you rent the unit on top of the space, it covers everybody, and it is one set of rules. Otherwise, I don't like multiple playbooks. That's just me. So if that's what you mean, Vice Chair Almond, yes, I would be supportive of that. I also think it reduces the administrative burden for sure. So yes. And then do we want to continue discussion on that topic, or would you like me to talk through my list? I don't want to put anyone to sleep, but it's still early.
So I just
smirking.
does committee member Grunwald want to do a direct response to that one question, or should we continue down our list?
Maybe not on that specific item, but I'll try to be brief and then let Nicole get to her list. So, I think to committee member Pardavizella's point, we have an extensive record and a lot of input on former members who are no longer part of this committee and current members. So there's a lot there. I felt like the initial regs that we developed, we were trying to some extent, fit a square peg into a round hole, right? So we had the CSFRA and we were trying to make it work for mobile homes. That was part of the reason the decision was made the way it was. So I think as a committee, I think we should give guidance on the administrative piece. So anything that we feel is going to make the administrative burden easier or more streamlined, I think we should try to align on that. I think regarding, there's, as part of this, there's rent stabilization questions. Then there's also, to some extent, land use questions and equity stabilization questions that the council is going to have to answer. And I think they probably want to start that from scratch, right? And the regs from scratch. But we should have an opinion on the best way to administer this if we're going to be the ones to do so. So, I think that'd be my opinion, is to at least give some guidance on how we'd like to administer this. But otherwise, I'll maybe leave it up to the individual committee members if they'd like to reach out to council with their input on the specifics of the regs, vacancy control, and those items. I don't know if we should necessarily give our opinion as a committee on those items.
Okay. All right. Committee member Haynes-Lucey, let's hear your list.
Okay. Yay. Let's see. Let me get to that page in the book. Okay. Found the book. So I think that we've already covered the idea of should we talk about a memorandum of understanding and a model lease, and then also rent control for those, or rent stabilization for those who don't get on the bus. It sounds like no, we're colloquialism was clean reg here. We want just one set of rule books. I think that we should remind the council, and maybe other members of the committee would disagree, that we may need to think about what is the base year. 2020 was a very weird year. And while the regs are being drafted in 2021, it may make sense to look back pre-COVID, i.e. 2019, for a base year, mostly because you have seen some interesting actions in the market, primarily with people purchasing homes, moving out of multifamily dwellings, et cetera, is responses to concerns around safety. This has changed how some of the pricing has looked in our community. And so maybe using 2020 as a base year is a bad idea because it's a outlier year. So that's just something I think we may want to consider suggesting, since we have some more data, and hopefully with our rent registry, even more data coming online soon, to support the idea of maybe using a different base year than 2020. And 2021, I guess you could make a case, but if you're drafting regs ideally to implement in August, September arena, you don't have a full 2021 data set. So 2019 might make sense for a base year. Also, just making sure that, all mobile home residents are covered, space rent and unit rent. And then just basically that we need a fee system of some nature to bring in revenue to cover the cost of administering the program. It's really important that the program be able to be paid for. And I think when we last talked about this in February of 2020, maybe I'm getting that wrong, we talked about the fact that we need to have the revenue to cover this. It can't come from, I think Karen, you even pointed out, we can't use the revenue that we use to support the CSFRA to also do a separate ordinance if it is a separate ordinance. So I think we need that. And then the other thing I would think of is just thinking about streamlining the capital improvements channel, like we're working to do with the CSFRA, to make it less unwieldy and time consuming, and ensuring that the residents and the park owners have a seat at the table to talk about the ordinance before it's put out there. I think it's important that there be listening sessions. And then if I had full druthers and I ruled the world, I would probably talk about possibly considering a different AGA for the mobile home residents, just due to the fixed income component and how many of the residents are on such a fixed income. CPI is not what you get on Social Security, et cetera, or disability. And therefore, it might make sense to tweak a little bit how the AGA is done for the mobile home population. But that was my laundry list of desires and hopes and dreams. So there you go.
Part of me just wants to say, staff, did you grab all that? But I promise we'll try to make this into a motion.
It's all right here.
So we have a number of things that were proposed. I see a hand up from committee member Grunwald.
Yeah, I mean, one of those items, I'm not sure. Well, I mean, let me know if you'd like to speak on one of the items that you spoke about. I have a couple that we may be able to find alignment on. Yeah, that's okay. So the fee, I definitely agree that we need a fee. I mean, the question to Karen, is the expectation that it could be, all the accounting would be done separately, right? Except maybe our technology systems, but I mean, what would, what questions do you have about what council would want to know about where we would share and where we would like keep things separate? Or do you foresee, or is another option that they were just thinking that the fees would be collected and then it's all part of one CSFRA kind of pot of budget, and then mobile homes are looped in there?
No, I mean, I think what's going to have to happen if an ordinance for mobile homes is adopted is staff is going to have to sort of keep track of time they spend on mobile homes and time they spend on CSFRA covered units. We're going to have to allocate, like for technology, you know, and come up with an allocation system so that, you know, the fees for mobile homes are going for the program for mobile homes, and the fees for CSFRA covered units are going for CSFRA covered units. I think it's doable, but we'll have to come up with sort of an accounting system.
Yeah. So since most of the costs are staffing and outside services, those hours just need to keep getting tracked over the course. And that's something that we can do for sure.
And we do already, just for clarification purposes, we do already administer other programs where we have to do that kind of accounting for different city programs as well.
Okay, so then, I mean, one concern that I have is with a smaller number of units, litigation costs, if there is a disagreement on something, you know, I'm concerned that with such a small number of units that litigation costs could bring that fee up significantly. So, you know, one thing that I would propose, and I proposed this for the CSFRA, but that was not accepted early on. San Francisco splits the fee, and I think what that might help solve is that everyone has a shared interest in the budget not exploding. So it could get the parties interested to work things out as opposed to additional litigation. And maybe it's just maybe it's concern that's unfounded, but yeah, I would like to hopefully the fee stays low for that group, and if it's split, I think that might help keep it low. I'd be interested in what the rest of the committee think.
Vice Chair Almond?
I don't understand what you mean about how would the fee be split? How would that make it more universal to the whole program? Can you explain that?
Yeah, sorry. So if the landlords are paying half of each fee and the mobile home owners are paying half each year, so if it's an $85 fee, $42.50, the landlord pays $42.50 for each unit, and then the mobile home owners pay $42.50 for their unit. But if one side, either side, were to pursue legal action, that does need to be paid for by the program, as we do today, right? We have significant legal fees. If the next year it meant that everybody had to pay $200 instead of $40, I think there'd be more motivation or incentive for both sides to get into a room and figure things out without litigation or legal fees, because they're both incentivized, to have low fees every year.
Vice Chair Almond, your hand is still up. All right, the hand is down. So we have the laundry list and some feedback. Did anyone else have feedback on Nicole's laundry list? And now we can start moving toward a form of consensus and a motion. So I could go through some of the various things that were listed out. I do support of having consistency in terms of among all the parks. And I don't like the idea that some parks will have a different kind of level of protections versus another different kinds. That is a worrisome aspect for me. And I do feel that that would make things more difficult to administrate the program. So that's how I feel on that. I'm not really fond of the fee schedule. that committee member Grunwald mentioned. But if city council wants to find another way to fund their program, like on a billionaire tax or something like that, that's up to them. All technically we care about is how we get the money. That could be a possibility there. I just think about how I believe in when Measure D was on the ballot, one mobile home park owner spent $90,000 just like that. So I don't know if money works kind of the same way when you think about $250 from one person versus $250 from another. So that's another thing that I was thinking about. I am open for the city council to take into account the additional vulnerable nature of mobile home residents, where if they want to have a lower AGA, I am open to that. Although I am cognizant that we can't dictate to council, we could just recommend, and that would be helpful. What else did Nicole have? Oh, I want to make sure that we do cover mobile home renters. So not only those who are space rent, but I also want to see coverage for those renters who are renting the mobile home itself from the park owner. That is something I want to make sure that is covered. I'm trying to think what else was addressed. Staff, am I missing anything?
I have 7 topics. The first is one set of rules for all mobile home parks, no opting out for certain park owners. Second rule, cover all mobile home owners and renters. Third, what shall we use as the base year? Fourth, a fee system for revenue. Think about whether or not to split fees between the park owner and the mobile home residents. 5, streamlining capital improvement petitions. 6, hold stakeholder meetings and listen to what is needed. And 7, different AGA considerations. And maybe you remember we did provide some tables and overviews in the past with differences between AGAs for rental apartments versus mobile homes. So that is quite a acceptable way of thinking about AGA. So those are the 7 I have. Is there anything else that I missed?
Rollback or
oh, is that the same as the base year, right?
Right, base year.
Yeah, I had that.
So personally, for me, the base year, I am willing to go for the lowest year as far back as October 19, 2015. I don't think I can get a clear consensus on that, but I'm willing to go down that low. So if we're going to agree on 2017 or when we first had it brought forth to the RHC, or if you want to do 2019 where we did our study session, or January of 2020 when council had their study session, we can negotiate that down. So I do believe that committee member Haynes Livesay brought it up, but we didn't hear about a possible base years from each from the 3 other committee members. Okay, so we have committee member, Vice Chair Allman.
I would agree with you. I mean, I think it would be nice if we could go back to 2015 just to be consistent throughout our programs. I think the 2020 issue is problematic. So I would prefer to go back to the beginning of CSFRA with the base year. And I also agree that we should have one set of rules for the whole program. And yeah, I mean, basically I'm okay with everything else. I think it's very important that we realize that this population is different from apartments, and in the sense that we can't base the changes just directly on what our data comes in on apartments, that we have a lot of very low income people in mobile homes, and that should be protected.
All right. Committee Member Grunwald, you had a brief hand up. Did you have any feedback about base year?
No specific feedback about base year.
Oh, okay.
And then I would say that I have a dissenting opinion, I think, on having all rules be the same, because it's my understanding that there are senior, I'm not sure what they're called, senior living communities, mobile home parks that you need to be, I think, over a certain age to be in. And I don't know if city council would be, I might leave it up to them to determine whether there should be different rules based on if it's a senior only park versus a non-senior park.
To further clarify, I don't think there are specific senior parks anymore, but there are parks where there live a lot of seniors, but they're not specifically assigned that label.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right. Committee member, Vice Chair Almond.
I just wanted to say, I agree that with Anki, I think that if there are no longer any senior parks, so therefore it would make it really difficult for staff, I think, if you had to, have one basis for one type of park and another. We want to make it as streamlined as possible so that we don't have more and more staff time trying to decide which programs are eligible. I think it's really important that we have, like Nicole said, have one set of rules, one program, all, under the same rubric.
Committee Member Pardo-Zella.
So I have a question for council. If we had a base year that was as far back as 2015 or even 16, is that more likely to trigger some sort of litigation that would be initiated by the mobile home park owners?
Possibly. I mean, there are cases. There's a somewhat recent case with a base year rollback of, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 years, that was upheld by the courts. I'm not sure if there are cases that go that far back. So further than that.
So, just on a few of the discrete points that were raised, in terms of the opting out, that's something that in my mind, I think I would defer to city council on something like that. There very well may be great reasons to have certain areas opt out or not. I can just say, frankly, I don't know enough about specifically what negotiations might take place, where there might be something that would be very beneficial if a specific owner were allowed to opt out. So I don't know that we can really predict all of the discussions and conversations that would surround that topic enough to say that opting out would just categorically be something that we would be opposed to, or at least I can only speak for myself on that point. I think Matt's point about splitting the fees is a very good one, and I agree with it in principle. I think the challenge is that now we already have a system in place where we're not doing a fee split on existing covered units. And I think for the sake of consistency, I like the idea of sticking with what we currently have in place. I think it's hard to kind of say, well, we've got covered units in Mountain View and there's no split. And then we're also got mobile homes. And for example, they're paying, $50 a month. And it's kind of hard to reconcile those two in my mind. So I think we're starting from scratch and doing it all from the beginning. Some kind of split on the fees would make sense in my mind, because I think it's always good for everyone to have some skin in the game. But I don't particularly like the idea of just tacking that on now to mobile home owners or residents and not having that apply to other covered units. And then, my last point would just be, and maybe I've missed this, and so I apologize, but I think kind of a subtext to all this is when we provide our input, whatever that may be, to the city council, I think something that they need to understand or would like to know is, are we providing our input and then essentially handing this off to them, and then whatever decision they make is something that we are going to go along with? Or is there a sense that if they don't take certain affirmative steps that a majority of the RHC thinks needs to be taken, that then thereafter, somewhere down the road, we're going to still step in and take some action on our own? And I don't know that we can even answer that right now, or if there is a way to answer that, but I think that's a question that I would potentially have if I were on city council, and I would want to know, is this input coming in as friendly input and we can choose to disregard it or take it all into account? Or if we disregard it, is the RHC going to go ahead and do some stuff that we might not be expecting? So the sense we have any guidance at all on that point, I think would be helpful. And I'm also mindful that the makeup of the RHC could be different in 6 months. And so maybe we can't even say anything to that point. But to the extent we have anything to say, I think it might help the city council understand what our input really means.
Committee Member Haynes Livesay?
For any of my input that I listed out on my quote unquote laundry list, that was friendly input. I don't believe in the do as I ask or I won't cooperate viewpoint. So I would encourage us to provide reasonable, friendly input, but ultimately we will administer what the council determines to be appropriate for our community, and that is what we do, and that is our duty. So that's my view on my input, at least.
Jump in there then. So I agree with everything Nicole said, that point specifically, and then everything she said before then. So I'm in complete agreement with Nicole on these issues.
Julian, you're fading in and out.
I think we got the gist, though, of what the committee member Partizilla said, that he agreed. Did you have additional input, committee member Vice Chair Allman? Sorry.
Yeah, we are an independent body. And CSFRA was created so that we are not under the rubric of the council. In this situation, we're providing input, and I think it's very vital and appropriate input. But I don't think we should throw up our hands and say we will never consider this in the future, because it could very well be that the city council comes to an impasse and does not go forward with an ordinance, and then the mobile home folks are still out in the cold. So I think it's really important that all of our committee's input be brought forward, but I don't think we would want to say, well, from now on, we will never discuss the topic or consider providing regulations.
Committee Member Grunwald?
Thanks. I'd just like to say that I think I agree with Committee Member Partizella and Haynes Livesay in that I guess if there are items that we feel strongly about, then I'd like to see us actually do a straw poll or have a majority if we're going to put it in as a strong input. Otherwise, I'd defer to saying it's friendly input, because I mean on every topic we've had some differences of opinion. So yeah.
We may actually have to do a straw poll anyway, so that we give better guidance to staff based on what staff needs to write this letter. I do feel like this whole exercise is an exercise of trust between the RHC and council. The RHC is trusting council to take the steps necessary to protect our mobile home residents, and council is trusting us to provide the administration necessary to do it. So I'm hoping that we are all here open and willing to trust each other to do that. I mean, I don't want to. I think the one hard fast thing that I would like to think is that they cannot expect us to administrate it without actually giving us the money to administrate it. That seems like an obvious no-go. So like I don't want to do the nevers. That like no matter what council will do, we'll administrate it, because there are some obvious issues if we do that, just out of sheer responsibleness to the law. So we can go through. Anki, how would you like us to consolidate this input? I know we mentioned, you said it was like 7 different points.
Yeah. So I would like for someone to start a motion that, yes, you do want to provide initial input to the city council as follows. And then we'll go through each of the 7 to see if that has the majority of the rental housing committee.
Sounds good, but can you remind me what the 7 points were again?
Oh yeah, I can do them one by one. Okay. So number 1 is an ordinance needs to cover both mobile home owners and renters. The second one is there should only be one set of rules, one ordinance, and not the option to opt out for certain park owners. The third one is what should be set as the base year, and here we have difference of opinions. And then the fourth one is, do we have any recommendations for a fee system for revenue, and should it be split or not? Number 5, streamlining capital improvement petitions. Number 6, the ordinance could be subject to different AGA considerations, diverting from what is in the CSFRA. And the last one is there should be stakeholder meetings to listen to the needs of the residents and park owners.
All right.
Is there clarification on the capital improvement petition streamlining at all? I'm confused by that.
What I understand from Nicole is please include capital improvement petition, so we're not stuck with an MNOI petition that is a very been seen as a cumbersome process.
So to have both of them in the ordinance? Yeah. Thank you for the clarification.
That is exactly it, yes.
All right, so do you want the motion first, or should we do the straw poll first and then take the results from the straw poll into the motion?
Yeah, well, however you like to do it.
All right.
Yeah.
I am going to, let's remove the shared screen. So I can use like a raised hand, a physical raised hand. That will probably make things a little easier for everyone. All right. All right, so the first one, it should cover both owners of mobile home mobile homes and the renters of mobile homes. Do we have an agreement on that? Please raise your hand if it's yes. Unanimous, yay. The next one, to not include an opt-out, or I guess we may need to discuss that more if we don't come to a reasonable consensus here. But I'll start with a no opt-out options for coverage of mobile home parks.
Sorry, can you clarify opt-out?
Who wants to clarify this?
Park owners can't opt out of the system.
Anki, you're on mute.
So what I'm understanding is no dual system where there is an ordinance, but there is then also the alternative of a long-term lease option. And the way it was worded in last week's city council, park owners who are complying and following the rules can just use an MOU with a long-term lease, and only when they don't comply with that, they have to follow an ordinance. So it is a dual system.
Sorry, Anki, would there be a case where some of the smaller parks, where the mobile home owners and the park owner would get together? Like we have, similarly, we just passed regs so that a landlord and tenant can decide, that yes, a certain capital improvement can be made, or they can refine the lease. I just wouldn't want to prevent. Maybe if we added language, maybe there's a friendly amendment to the question, Emily. But if we just added language, unless somehow
like
the park owners and sorry,
perhaps like a similar or greater protections kind of language.
Yeah. So, or I mean, I would just say that unless the owners decide by majority, I'm not sure how that would work. I don't know enough. I think about how they work out.
I do want to point out that an MOU long-term lease works a little bit different than an ordinance. It has a whole set of administrative procedures. It has no petition process. The rules that are being set out up front are covered in a long-term lease. For instance, in Sunnyvale, there is one park that hands out 10-year leases. And the most important part of that long-term lease is that the tenants know for 10 years what the rent increase will be. But then those need to be renegotiated after those long-term periods. And there is one city in California, Modesto, that has both. So most cities have an ordinance, a regular ordinance that applies to all the mobile home parks. There are maybe 7 to 10 cities in all of California that have the MOU long-term lease. And there's one city in California, Modesto, that has both. And they came to that specific hybrid because one park owner refused to comply with the long-term lease MOU regulations. So they then went back and put an ordinance in place for that one park owner. And you can clarify further, Karen, that was to kind of be able to enforce the park owner into compliance with the rent stabilization regulations that they adopted.
Yeah, that is my understanding. And I do think that now all of the park owners have signed on to the MOU, but they've kept the rent stabilization on the books.
And sorry, one more clarification. So is there the idea of like an HOA that can decide on behalf of all park owners?
There's an MOU with the city.
Park residents?
Of mobile home owners within the park. Can they, I just wouldn't want to prevent if mobile home mobile homeowners decided that they wanted to negotiate a lease with their park owner, and they want to opt, they say, keep us out of everything. This is something we've agreed to. I'm not sure if that's actually something that would occur, but I just would want to say that that would be something that we'd accept.
I have not seen that, but
no, I mean, there might be owner or mobile home park resident groups in each park, but I don't know that you would ever get like 100% agreement on anything, frankly. So
that's fair. That's fair. So we can move ahead with the question, Emily.
So it is a no opt-out type of ordinance, and I guess we could frame this as a uniformity to the CSFRA. I support this no opt-out because I also now think about, like, these are meant to be protections and rights. You kind of don't waive those. And I can't even imagine what would be the case for a renter, like a non-mobile home renter, like an apartment renter, being like, I'm going to sign this contract to not, and there's some things like the capital improvements, which we are working with, which that's going to be another question in our list of questions. So I think I'm okay with the no opt-out. So I'm going to ask that question. This is question number 2 for our thing. So straw poll, raise your hand if you agree with a no opt-out type of ordinance. Oop. All right, we have a 4-1. Next is base year, and I feel like this is not as binary. I've already mentioned I'm down for October 19, 2015, that fateful day. I remember that council meeting as well. But does anyone else have other ideas?
I mean, my initial was 2019 only because I did have some concern about going back too far and the potential of litigation about going back too far, not being a precedent, etc. I don't like the idea of using 2020. I think 2021 you won't have a full year of data for, so then I naturally fell on 2019. But, you know, and maybe we don't present that at all if we can't get consensus on it.
Committee member Paradizella.
I think it should be 2019. I have a sense we're not going to have consensus. And if we don't, I would just suggest that we impress upon the city council that this is a significant issue, at least in my mind, that they have to really tackle, because there's some ramifications, that are kind of a ripple effect that comes out of this. So if we don't have agreement right now, assuming we don't, that it's something that they should really kind of have at the top of the list to figure out, because I think it's a significant one.
All right. I'm not seeing quite a consensus just yet. Actually, the only person I haven't heard about a possible year is committee member Grunwald.
I don't feel strongly, but I mean, if it's 4-1, I would prevent it from happening.
4-1 for what?
Sorry. If I'm the only detractor, then you know, I could be willing to go along, but I'd also just let council kind of figure out what's reasonable.
Ms. Karen, what was the farthest back that you thought that we can go based on prior case law?
There is a case where I think the city, and I was just looking to see if I can find it, but I can't. And I think the city went back maybe 3 years. It was either 3 or 4, I can't remember. But that is the farthest that I seem to recall in the cases I looked at.
So who wants to settle on 2018? That's like in the middle, right? Ish.
Well, we got started in 2017, right? The implementation started in 2017. Is that considered more than 3 years? Because we're only at the beginning of 21, right?
That would be 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it depends on when this actually gets adopted. I mean, the main point of rollbacks is or base years, there's a couple points, but one is once you start talking about rent stabilization, sometimes that causes property owners to implement large rent increases to try to circumvent it. So one of the points of a rollback is to sort of take those out of the picture. So that's the primary purpose of why the CSFRA rolled back to October 19th or whatever the date was in 2015, because that's when the city started talking about rent stabilization. For mobile homes, I'm not sure we have a bright line test. You know, the city council talked about it, I think, in March of 2019 initially, and had a study session in February or January of 2020. So that's most often where the rollbacks come from. Or the base year dates.
And I also do a yearly survey among the park owners to see what rent increases they have given. And the regular rent increases for existing residents were pretty much in line or with the AGA, or they gave a little higher AGA 1 year and then no increase the next year. But I have that overview is available in some of the previous memos that we provided. That might not be the same for the renters that rent the mobile homes and the space rent. I have no insight in those numbers.
It's hard to say when mobile homes first came up, because the historian in me has seen articles talking about it as early as 2001. I remember there was a City Council 2016 meeting. Measure V was already on the ballot, and that's why council chose not to move forward. Long history, but it was mentioned there. And then we had when mobile home park residents first showed up, when we looked at it in December of 2017. Then you also had council take a look May 2019, and then you had council look at January 2020. So there are a lot of weird milestones with mobile homes, lots of discussion. Like I said, I'm really hoping that we can find a way to agree on a number or a spirit. Committee member Haynes Lipsey?
Maybe if we can't agree on a number, maybe to agree on a spirit, we say pre-2020, pre-pandemic. And at least that gives some guidance of we ideally don't want to see anything from 2021 or 2020 be invoked. And that gives council a friendly nudge in the direction of let's look towards the past without really hemming them in on what they consider to be the appropriate base year. And maybe we could get consensus on that idea.
Okay, so we can find ourselves in agreement that we should look to the past for this base year and a possible rollback. Are we in agreement of that? Raise your hand if you're in agreement.
Sorry, was there a year? When you say the past, is there?
I did not specify a year.
Okay.
I guess we can go far back as pre-pandemic, is what Nicole says, but I want to emphasize past, as I'm okay with as early as defensible.
Now you change your question again. So
Yeah. Sorry. All right, we're gonna go backwards here. Okay, how many people are okay with looking to the past pre-pandemic?
Vice Chair Almond, we can't see your hand.
Oh, well, that's because I want it to be before that. 2019, we had our highest rents. So I'm concerned about that.
So we could say at least 2019.
Sure.
I mean, I'm tempted to actually try to go lower. We can still agree, and then I'll see when the hands start dropping.
Let's try to go lower and see what happens.
All right, so how many people are okay with 2018? At least 2018, sorry. All right, we're at 3. It is a majority, but I would like to push for as much consensus as we can. So we'll say at least 2019. I saw hands up for that, but the big issue is at least. We can all agree on that, correct? Vice Chair Almond?
Well, I mean, we got a majority vote on 2018. I don't see any reason why we should push it forward to 2019.
Okay. This is just to recommend to the city council. You guys are not implementing anything right now, so think about it.
Yeah, I mean, all we're doing is recommending it, and they're likely to toss it, you know? So what does it hurt?
Well, it doesn't hurt, but it is also, I think, makes a stronger case if you can unanimously make some recommendations to the Rental Housing Committee. But that's up to you how you would like to approach it.
So, okay. Okay. It is important to me that we get as much consensus as possible. So we are going to go with at least 2019 because that as far as our consensus has gone. Nod your heads if that's all right. Next, we have fee system.
For my own clarification purposes,
yes.
Was that for the rollback and the base year? The 2019 date?
That was for the base year. And that's and then there needs to be probably a date for the rollback, but we don't have to be that specific. We can just, whatever the Rental Housing Committee feels is important to communicate, they can communicate.
So I guess the fee system, I guess the biggest thing is like, please make sure that's paid for. Can we all agree on that? Council, please pay for it. Hands. Wonderful. Now, I guess, how much do we want to delve into the fee system? Do we want to be how prescriptive or how not prescriptive? I guess to the point that we can come to a consensus on. I am personally rather have it to be the same system as we do with the CSFRA. Does anyone have a different sense or modification to that? I have a hand up from Vice Chair Almond. That
was an old hand up. Sorry.
The hand is no longer up. All right, committee member Haynes Livesay.
You know, in thinking about this, I think because of the unique component of having your mobile home owners of their unit and renters of their unit, we may not want to get too prescriptive on the fees, especially around how they're subdivided, only because I could see a situation whereby if it was to become allowable, someone was to own their unit but decide to rent or sublease to someone else. And then you get into the discussion of what does that look like from a fee splits point of view? Do we go thirdsies? You know, what is that going to do with the fee split? So maybe we kind of stay quiet on that component and let council at least take a crack at how they think the fee should be charged and handled. And then ideally, maybe we get to give more input in the future. And, you know, if we feel like we need to nudge or tap in a direction, we can do that. But maybe we stay a little high level on that.
Does that seem reasonable direction, staff, that we can take a vote on?
Yeah.
All right. Does everyone agree with that assessment from the committee member Haynes Livesay? Raise your hand. All right, that's unanimous. Next is capital improvements, and forgive me, I totally don't remember what the.
Fine. So the only recommendation is to include a specific capital improvement petition from the get-go, petition process from the get-go. So don't forget about that.
All right. Does everyone agree with that? Raise your hands. All right. We are unanimous. We're almost okay. The next one is the AGA, and I believe the differentiation was being open to the possibility of taking into account the increased vulnerability status of some mobile home park residents to have a possible lower AGA. Do we have an agreement on that? Raise your hand if you do agree on that. We have unanimous. How wonderful. All right, and then the last one, this seems...
just to clarify on that one,
yes.
that they would take it into account. That's
yes.
all. That's what that was.
Yes, I don't feel entirely comfortable dictating to council on that, nor do I believe that they would actually like listen to us if we say you have to have it like that. So it's just a suggestion that they can take that into account.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Then 7, stakeholder, reaching out to stakeholder groups. That seems pretty easy to me. So do we all agree that there should be outreach to stakeholder groups? Is that what the question was? I'm sorry. Okay, just checking. All right. Stakeholder groups?
I have a question. Does that mean we're providing outreach to stakeholders, or are we saying that depending on what the stakeholders like park owners say, we would manipulate the regulations?
No, stakeholders means organized meetings where everybody can say what they need from this ordinance and take that into account when you develop an ordinance. And that is a city council, would be a city council action item.
Quick question in relation to that. Would that make this go slower? Because I don't want that.
Well, that just depends who's organizing the stakeholder meetings, I guess.
And
it doesn't have to be. Let's put it that way. It doesn't have to be.
We did hold them last year during the previous discussions in, what was that, February and January, as we've shared. And we were able to organize those relatively quickly during that process. Anki, can you have any insight into that?
Yeah, we could even send together with this letter, we could send a copy of the survey, and we could send the summary of the past stakeholder meetings. I don't think a lot has changed since their last year. We could definitely send that along. And so maybe you want to reword, take into account input from the stakeholders. Maybe you want to rephrase it that way. That's just a suggestion.
All right. So are we in agreement of stakeholder meetings with the additional resources we have accumulated to give to council? I'm also partial to not slow down the process either. So I guess the way I would ask this question is, are we in support of stakeholder meetings that do not slow this process down, but also, and also give our resources that we have in relation to that to council and council staff? That sounded like a really long question, but how do we feel about that?
I guess maybe friendly amendment or consideration first. I mean, I think council's typical routine or playbook is to get stakeholder input, and if we feel like they're already going to take that, maybe not. Do we have to have this bullet item in our list? I don't want to try to require something of them and then make them feel as though they're required.
Well, maybe just say consider stakeholder input and then provide summaries and the surveys that already has been executed by the rental housing committee. Something like that.
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
All right, so yeah. I accept that. I'm assuming with that we are unanimous. Woohoo! All right, that seems to be all the questions that you listed out. Were there any additional inputs?
And I need one last question answered. Is everybody okay that Emily finalize that letter and send it on behalf of the rental housing committee?
Are we raising
quick question again? Are we saying this is friendly? Did we agree that we're going to say this is friendly input?
Yes.
And that none of this is a prerequisite for this to move forward?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Great, then I'm in support. Yes.
Like I said, it's really up to council whether they choose our input. So I will be as nice as possible. I think that is everything. How do we feel? We're good? All right. I'm going to end this agenda item. So we are going to our next, oh man, we still have
Emily, Emily, do you want to consider skipping the second agenda item and go over the other two, or do you want to definitely go over the capital improvements regulations now? And that probably will mean we have to postpone the other agenda items. Which ones would you like to give priority?
I guess how I feel like we can push 8.4 back again, like we had for the past like 10 months. But I have a question. 8.3 quarterly financial.
This is just purely informational. If you guys are okay with just reading the memo and the slides and not have it discussed in a meeting, that's fine too. So we don't have to keep bringing it back.
All right. So I'll make. Oh,
are we saying the which thing are we postponing? That's what I wanted to know.
I was going to postpone 8.4 for sure, but then there's a question of whether or not we postpone 8.3.
And 8.4 is the
I'm not looking at it, so
sorry. 8.4 is the CPI indexes. Taking a look at that, I believe that's mostly a report with questions and deliberation and feedback. The same thing is the quarterly finances, or we can do those two and push capital improvements to the next month. Either way works for me. I'm trying to read any of your faces to see if you have any specific preferences. Does anyone have any specific preferences? Committee Member Grunwald.
Sure, I'm not, since we're in between agenda items, I'm not sure if this is deliberation or where we're at, but I would prefer 8.2. We've had a lot of meeting study sessions on. I'd prefer to move 8.3 and 8.4 and get that done.
All right.
What?
Oh, Is that
sorry for Susan? It's 8.2 would be the capital, or sorry, actually, yeah, capital improvements. Sorry, the title of it didn't say capital improvements, but it'd be capital improvements. Keep that, make a decision there, and then move the financial expenditures and a fair return calculation, which are just informative discussions, to the next meeting.
Want to make the motion?
Yes, I will make that. Sorry. Go ahead.
I would prefer that we postpone the capital improvements, because I think that's going to be a really meaty, lengthy discussion. I think it would be better for us to put it in the next agenda. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I think we've got a lot to discuss there.
I'm pretty neutral, so someone make a motion and someone second it.
I'll make a motion to move 8.3 and 8.4 to our next meeting agenda.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
All right, we have a second from committee member Haynes Livesay. Andrea, can you do a roll call vote?
We'll start with committee member Parna Dizella.
Aye.
Committee member Haynes Livesay.
Aye.
Committee member Grunwald.
Aye.
Vice Chair Almond.
Nay.
Chair Ramos.
Aye.
And motion passes 4 votes to 1.
All right, we're moving on with 8.3 and 8.4, pushback, another meeting. One day we will get to it. But until then, we are now at 8.2, draft regulations amending Chapter 6, upward adjustments, and we have a staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Ramos. Good evening, committee members. Item 8.2 is a staff presentation on amendments for Chapter 6, upward adjustments. And you'll note that these are regulations for 2 new upward adjustment petitions, the specified capital improvement upward adjustments, and joint petitions for new and additional housing services. This recommendation is to review the draft regulations regarding specified capital improvement petitions and joint petitions for new and additional housing services, and either provide further direction to staff or adopt a resolution approving regulations. Quick background here, we've discussed this in previous meetings, but the CSFRA, it stabilizes the community by reducing rental housing turnover, by stabilizing rents, providing eviction protections, and ensuring a fair rate of return on investment, which is what we're discussing this evening. Section 1700 of the CSFRA states that housing providers are entitled to a fair and reasonable return on their investment, and they do that through one of 3 ways. One is the annual general adjustment of rent. The second is through vacancy decontrol. And finally, we have an option for individual petitions for upward adjustment of rent using a fair return standard. Sections 1708, 1710, and 1711 of the CSFRA charge the RHC with promulgating regulations to establish rules and regulations for the administration and enforcement of the CSFRA, implementing the petition process, and providing landlords with a mechanism for achieving a fair rate of return that addresses individualized circumstances. In August of 2020, the RHC considered adopting potential regulations, and at that time, you requested staff hold community meetings related to this topic. In January of 2021, after those community meetings were held, the RHC held a study session and provided feedback on policy options, as well as requesting an additional study session. On February 22nd, 2021, the second study session on this topic was held, and you provided additional policy direction and requested regulations for a capital improvement petition process and a joint petition process for new and additional housing services. We're going to go over the capital improvement regulations first. So the first thing to point out are the reasons for these petitions. They encourage landlords to proactively maintain their property, promote safe and healthy housing for tenants, reduce potential large-scale displacement, and preserve the affordable housing stock in the city. The policy basics are as follows. The CSFRA limits capital improvements to improvements necessary to bring the property into compliance with applicable building codes and cannot include costs that could have been avoided by the exercise of reasonable diligence in maintaining the property. Specified capital improvements are generally major capital improvements that significantly extend the life of the property, and they must also meet the definition of capital improvements that are already part of Chapter 6. And we're going to go through some of the details of the regulations now, but we will not be reading the regulations in full this evening. There are two features for a fair return, and this is in Section B of Chapter 6. The two methods are maintaining net operating income and the recovery of specified capital improvements. Capital improvements in the definition section of Chapter 6, which is Section C, are those improvements that are necessary to bring the property into compliance or maintain compliance with applicable building or housing codes, including seismic upgrades required by code, excluding costs avoidable through exercise of reasonable diligence in maintaining or repairing rental units or property. And you can find the full list of qualifications and exclusions in this definition in Section C. And also in Schedule A. So as requested by the RHC, there are two schedules, and these will be presented with their appropriate petition when the actual materials for the program are developed. So at no time would a potential petitioner or a tenant see these presented together, the actual schedules for amortization and approved expenses. To reduce confusion, they would always only be with their applicable petition. Specified capital improvements are included in C10 and Schedule B. They have more categories. They have an additional qualification as well. And from those categories, there is a more refined list of improved expenses. So specified capital improvements shall be limited to capital improvements that meet the requirements as defined in subsection C3 and are necessary to significantly extend the useful life of the covered rental unit or property. These are included in the category section sent forth in Appendix B. Not when you're looking at Appendix B, it would be the qualifications, and then there's those broad categories that all of the expenses would need to fall under. They are a subset of capital improvements. This is an expedited petition process. Landlords need to complete the petition and provide the type and cost of capital improvements, including third-party verification of costs. They'll need to provide a tenant rent roll and initial occupancy date and rent, and be sure to include applicable permits or approvals. And this can be found in Chapter 6 F3 and of the CSFRA itself in 1710A3D. The hearing process is truncated, and a petition request can be made for future or current specified capital improvements. Any awarded future capital improvement adjustments are not effective until proof of installation and costs are provided to the hearing officer. And this is a strictly administrative decision by a hearing officer unless a tenant requests a full hearing. This can be found in Section F4. There are standards for the specified capital improvement, and they're subject to the amortization schedule, which is Schedule B, although we won't be referring to it that way. It will be the schedule for specified capital improvement petitions. We are, at the request of the RHC, providing clarification on the last policy decision point that was still up to be discussed last study session, which is to limit the increase to 5% of rent, current rent, not inclusive of the AGA. It's not considered part of rent as defined in the CSFRA and not subject to the AGA. And I want to mention here that staff is making this recommendation so that it's easier to administer the petitions and less confusing across the multiple petitions that we have. There is a share of costs that are split between tenants and landlords based on the number of units on the property. And the increases sunset at the end of amortization period or at the vacancy of the unit. And this is a pro rata allocation to all to all units benefited by the special capital improvement petition. And this can be found in sections F5 and that Schedule B, otherwise known as the specified capital improvement authorized expenses and amortization schedule. The timeline for uncontested specified capital improvement petition is 30 days for notice to tenants if no tenant requests a hearing, and then 30 days for the hearing officer to issue a decision, which is 60 days total from the acceptance of the petition to the decision. For contested specified capital improvement petitions, 30 days for tenants to request a hearing, 30 days to hold the hearing from the time the tenant requests a hearing, and 30 days for the hearing officer to issue a decision. This would be approximately 90 days from the acceptance of the petition to the hearing and decision. For the additional new and additional housing services petition, we'll go over those regulations quickly as well. This is an additional petition process which would allow tenants and landlords to file a joint petition for an increase of rent or allow for a one-time payment from tenant to landlord in order to cover or partially cover increased costs in defined categories. And you'll see these categories defined here. The joint petition process can be found in Chapter 6, G1, and the types of petitionable items are as follows. New or additional housing services include new or additional pets, additional storage units, additional parking spaces, and there would be an option for an other should that be something that would be presented by a tenant to a landlord. The next section is improvements or modifications is requested by the tenant for the covered rental unit. And the third is additional occupants not defined as an eligible family member or as a roommate as defined in Chapter 9. And those are in section G1 as well. I do want to provide some clarification on the improvements or modifications as requested by the tenant feature of this petition. So for this section, the cost of such modifications or improvements shall either be amortized over the useful life of the improvement based on the schedules as attached in Appendix A or B as applicable, or the tenant and landlord may agree to a one-time payment for the tenant's share of the cost of the improvement or modification. The tenant's share of costs of such modifications or improvements shall not exceed the share of the specified capital improvement costs allocated to tenants in subsection F5DI. So we wanted to provide some clarification on this point. The RHC provided feedback that they wanted to ensure that tenants were not bearing the full cost of something that ultimately would be a benefit to the landlord. And this provides that option for to alleviate that concern that you had previously shared. And it also brings it in line with the specified capital improvement petitions for ease of administration. And this information can all be found in section G1 and schedules A and B. The upward adjustment of rent has a maximum amount of award allowed for a joint petition limited to 5% of the current rent for the covered rental unit. And the maximum amount of a one-time payment allowed is limited to 5% as well. This is similar to what other jurisdictions allow in their joint petitions for new and additional housing services, and also keep it in line with all of the other petitions that we're looking at for these regulations. And this can be found in G2. These petitions may only be filed, jointly with the landlord, but the tenant must initiate the process with their landlord, and tenants are responsible for obtaining the landlord's review and signature on the petition. The completed petition must be signed by both the tenant and the landlord, along with a copy of the written rental housing agreement, and those must be submitted to the RHC. The hearing officer would issue a decision outlining the allowed increase or one-time payment based solely on the joint petition and submitted documentation. The decision has the same effect as other administrative decisions of the RHC and establishes the upward adjustment of rent or one-time payment. And the hearing officer has the authority to approve or deny the joint petition, provided that the hearing officer shall only deny a joint petition Upon making the finding that the tenant has not freely consented to the request in situations with evidence of duress, misrepresentation, or other acts of misconduct, and these petitions are not appealable. This can all be found in G4. To further clarify, the increase is only effective after the tenant has been provided no less than the greater of 60 days notice prior to the due date of the first payment of upward adjustment, or the notice period required by the Civil Code section 827, and has no upward adjustment pursuant to a joint petition, shall be effective until at least 12 months has expired since the last rent increase for the covered rental unit. This makes it so that it is allowable under the CSFRA. And any upward adjustment authorized pursuant to section G1B, which is that one that's specific for something similar to a specified capital improvement, shall not be considered rent when determining any annual general adjustment pursuant to 1707 of the CSFRA. And this is found in chapter 6 G5. And we do want to clarify that just as the amortization schedules state, if an improvement is not captured in the amortization schedule, the hearing officer still has discretion to determine whether or not that improvement would be allowed in both types of petitions. The fiscal impact for this is obviously associated with staffing costs and materials associated with outreach. And the recommendation from staff is to review these draft regulations regarding specified capital improvement petitions and joint petitions for new and additional housing services, and either provide further direction to staff or adopt a resolution approving regulations. The final recommendation is to adopt a resolution amending Chapter 6 upward adjustments, and that is the end of staff's presentation, and we'll take questions at this time.
Does anyone have any questions? I see no hands raised. I'm looking at each one. Oh, Vice Chair Allman. You're muted, by the way.
Thank you. Are we going to get to discuss what items will be allowable for consideration? There are some items, for example, stoves and refrigerators and carpeting, that seem like those shouldn't be part of major capital improvements. If it's a roof or seismic retrofits, I could see that, but a lot of the smaller ones I think should be dropped from the schedule.
So there are, as we've mentioned, 2 schedules. The only one that's applicable for tonight's discussion is the one for specified capital improvements. I can pull that schedule up if you would like. That schedule we have reviewed and was approved at the last meeting, but we can certainly look at it again if you would prefer.
Well, and I think the things like stoves and appliances aren't part of that schedule.
That's correct.
So specified capital improvements do only include the larger items. So there is a difference between Appendix A and Appendix B. And like appliances are not part of Appendix B, which are the specified capital improvements.
Okay, that's good.
Would you like me to pull the schedule up that we're referring to for today?
Right, yeah, there. I think it would be helpful for everybody.
Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
And to clarify, these were provided in the regulations that were sent in the agenda as well, for your reference if you have those. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
So as staff mentioned, the categories here are the things to focus on. These are the big items that all of the other, the actual amortization schedule spells out. And because of that, this is really the section that is I would say, something to be focused on. So it's really your big ticket items for this new roof covering that covers new roof covering all or substantially all of the building. And again, the RHC has reviewed and approved these has reviewed and approved these in the past 2 meetings. New roof covering all or substantially all of a building or a structurally independent portion of a building, and or significant upgrade to the foundation of all or substantially all of a building or a structurally independent portion of a building, including seismic retrofits, and or new or substantially new plumbing, electrical, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system for all or substantially all of a building, and or exterior painting or replacement of siding on all or substantially all of a building, and or repairs reasonably related to correcting and or preventing the spread of defects which are noted as findings in a wood destroying pest and organisms inspection report, and or the installation of water conservation devices intended to reduce the use of water or energy efficient devices such as solar roof systems, and or improvements that or upgrades to the rental unit or the building complex that meet or exceed disability and accessibility standards as required by law. So those are the only categories of improvements that are allowed in this petition. And then we have our amortization schedule, which provides guidance to petitioners on what will be allowed, but the hearing officer still has the ability to allow for additional improvements that might fall outside of these specific items. So the categories are really the big overarching umbrella. So it's kind of like you have the big roof of the qualifications, which are what are in the definitions in chapter 6. So they have all the capital improvement petitions have to be items that are necessary to bring the property or covered rental unit into compliance or to maintain compliance with applicable building or housing codes. And they must primarily benefit the tenant rather than the landlord. And they must be permanently affixed in place or relatively immobile and have a useful life of more than 5 years and appreciably prolong the useful life of the property and not be excluded pursuant to chapter 6 subsection C3. So that's our big roof, and we can go and take a look at that. And this is the definition that has existed in our regulations for our petitions for M&OI. We haven't touched this, aside from changing it to allow for 5 years instead of 1 year so that they're in alignment with each other, as was agreed to by the committee last month. So we'll just go and take a look at this definition. You'll see here, it's very long and explicit. So they must be necessary to bring the property or covered rental unit into compliance or to maintain compliance with applicable building or housing codes, including, without limitation, additions or modifications made to prevent the occurrence of conditions listed in Mountain View City Code section 25.58, the International Property Maintenance Code as incorporated by reference into the Mountain View City Code, and or California Green Building Standards as codified in Chapter 4, Residential Mandatory Measures of Part 11 of Title 24 of the California Code of Regulations, and any required seismic upgrades required by local or state codes as each may be amended or revised. So this has been our text for a very long time. and then primarily benefit the tenant, have a useful life of more than 5 years, and be permanently fixed in place or relatively immobile. So that is always the capital improvement definition. For these ones, and we have very specific exclusions as well. So capital improvements cannot be costs of additions or modifications of a physical feature or portions of additions or modifications that could have been avoided by a landlord's exercise of reasonable diligence in maintaining and making timely repairs after the landlord knew or should reasonably have known of the problem that caused the damage leading to the addition or modification. They cannot be for the use or installation of a landlord's personal appliance, furniture, or other items that are inherited or borrowed. They cannot be ordinary or routine repair, replacement, or maintenance to a covered rental unit or property containing a covered rental unit. So this is an important one. And then they can't be over improvements, for example, replacing a standard bathtub with a jacuzzi bathtub, unless the tenant approved the improvement in writing pursuant to a joint petition. This is updated for the joint petition process. The improvement brought the covered rental unit up to current building or housing codes, or the improvement was necessary to meet California Green Building Standards, or the improvement did not cost more than a substantially equivalent replacement. So the only change in this portion of this regulation is this here that I've highlighted on the screen. Unless the tenant approved the improvement in writing pursuant to a joint petition pursuant to subsection L below, nothing else has changed in this for the capital improvement petitions that we're discussing tonight. So we'll go back down to the schedule here that we're looking at, which is only, and this is how this will be presented in the future, it won't say Appendix B, it will only say specified capital improvement petition, expenses and amortization schedule. So we have those broad categories that are in the definitions that we discussed, and then the broad qualifications that are in the definitions that we discussed. And then that's our roof. And then we have categories. The categories are like an umbrella. Every capital improvement that is able to be petitioned for in this process has to meet at least one of these categories. And then this is kind of like an example of items that if you did these things, you could apply for a capital improvement petition. But just as the amortization schedule has always been for our petitions, for the M&OI petition, this still allows for some flexibility for the petitioner and for the hearing officer. If there's an item that's not on this list, that a person could come and say, hey, this item's not on this list. Is there a possibility of it still being covered under the petition? And the hearing officer in that case would be able to say yes or no, just as they've always been able to do. But it doesn't allow for small items. It really only allows for these big items. And as we've discussed in the previous meetings, these schedules are in line with every other jurisdiction that has these type of petitions.
I really appreciate you reviewing that. Thank you very much.
Of course, anytime.
I mean, I read it through it, but you make it clearer. Thanks.
Do we have any other questions by committee members before we go on to public comment? Shaking head, shaking head. See, three shaking heads. All right, we're gonna go to public comment then. All right. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raised hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will keep time and announce when 1 minute remains. All right, we have a hand. Wonderful. So Edie Keating, you have 3 minutes.
I'm sure no one is surprised that I have comments on this item. My email I sent earlier today that I hope everyone has had a chance to see one way or another asks for clarifying language. It asks to trust the tenant and the landlord to work things out more than the current Chapter 6 allows in the joint petition. you don't want things to be done under the table. If there's a more substantial improvement that the tenant wants and the landlord is willing, if they're paid right away, then that'll be a check directly from the tenant to the landlord and you'll never know about it. So I don't know, it just seems, I guess maybe that's not so bad, but I would think you would want to allow the flexibility and know what's going on. I think it's important to be transparent in the amortization list that the capital improvement must be required by code. Solar panels remain in that list, but I'm not aware that solar panels are required by code on existing buildings. So, and as we all know, where we all have been very transparent in our conversations, is that seismic retrofits are not currently required. They may be in the future. So I think it's worthwhile to authorize staff to maintain an asterisk that says these are the items that may be authorized in the future as specified capital improvements, but not currently, because they are not currently approved by code. And I also sent a timely email I received today that there's legislation being sought at the state level to have some triggers for adding electric car chargers at apartments. And you know, that's certainly something that many apartment dwellers would like to have. So I hope you will consider my text suggestions, perhaps refer them to whoever will be finalizing these regulations and ask them to incorporate the changes if they feel they clarify the intent of this. And I think many tenants will be happy to have the joint petition process. Thank you.
Thank you, Edie Keating. Next, we have Alexander Brown.
I'm torn between wanting to just pass this, get it over with, and make staff's lives easier, and wanting to see just how many times this can come before the committee to see if we can set a record. Oh, I also support what that woman said. That's about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Alexander Brown. We will bring it back to the committee. So any motions to approve should include reading the following item: to adopt a resolution amending Chapter 8 upward adjustment regulations regarding specified capital improvement petitions and joint petition for new and additional housing services. But I assume that there might be some discussion first. So who wants to go first? I guess I'll start with what Edie mentioned about an asterisk on the capital improvement thing. Is that should be easy to add. I say it should be, but I don't know.
Actually going into explicitly for staff to go into all of the applicable state and local and federal housing codes could be quite cumbersome, which is why we have left those items in the previous amortization schedule and provided guidance to petitioners throughout the process for the M&OI petitions. Obviously for big items where we definitely know that it is absolutely not yet applicable, we can do that. We were planning on making a guide and providing guidance as requested by the RHC in previous meetings to support this petition during the process, and that was where what staff was leaning toward. Would that be an option that would be amenable, a blend of the different options that we have?
Yeah, that seems amenable to me. Do we have agreement with the other committee members? You can nod your heads. I see a thumbs up from one. I see a nod. I see another thumbs up. All right, we're good. Any other commentary? Committee member Haynes Lipsey.
My commentary is I'm pleased. I know we have done several rounds on this, but I do feel like we have done good work here and have something that hopefully we can pass. So thank you.
Another question I have, the public commenter Edie sent us an email with a bunch of edits. Has staff looked at that?
I'm going to look to Karen for this.
Yes, we have gone through those edits. I'm pulling them up right now. I had them open. So if you just want to run through them, we can go through them pretty quickly. So the first comment was to change the language in one of the opening paragraphs from additionally to alternatively. We actually don't think that is an appropriate change because it's not one or the other. There could be property owners that do a maintenance of net operating petition and then later do a specified capital improvement petition, and the use of the word alternatively could lead to determination that they can't do that. Comment 2 was to remove some language from the definition of capital improvement, in particular the exclusion language under over improvement. The language that the language that was suggested to be removed is actually what is currently in your regulations. And we do think it's helpful just to clarify over improvement issues. Comment 3, I think that Patricia addressed. I think this was a little bit of a misunderstanding. The categories, so to be a specified capital improvement, the capital improvement must fit within one of those categories listed on Appendix B. And then the specific list of items are potentially items that fit in those categories. So we don't want to eliminate the categories from the definition of specified capital improvements because that's an important part of the definition. The point of specified capital improvements is they're supposed to be major capital improvements. And so that's what those categories do. Yeah, so comment 4. Comment 4 is, I think, a question for the RHC. There's currently a 5% of 1 month's rent limitation on a one-time pass-through. The RHC may want to consider increasing that amount based on that comment. Comment 5, I think once again is a policy decision for the RHC. What the regulations currently say is if in a joint petition the tenant and the landlord agree on an improvement that the tenant wants, that it would be subject to the amortization schedules that apply to other capital improvements. But that is a policy decision and whether you want to continue that. Comment 6 was whether language in Appendix B should be deleted. That language says, additionally, capital improvements that adhere to the above qualifications and also improve the environmental sustainability of the property while reducing costs to tenants may be considered. That is language that sort of the genesis of that comes out of Measure D. Environmental sustainability measures were an important factor in contemplating capital improvements. This language doesn't necessarily add a lot, but it does keep environmental sustainability sort of in the consciousness of everyone should those items become subject to code. And then comment 7, I think we've already discussed. There are items on the list that may not be required by code right at the moment, but in the future maybe, and would be continued to be listed so that
what we had just addressed
constantly
before that.
amended. Yep.
Okay. I guess the only one, when you mentioned it was a policy decision, I believe was comment 4. Everything else seemed to have been explained already.
I think comment 4 and comment 5 are policy decisions for the RHC.
Do we have any appetite to consider that, or should we move forward? A motion is in order. So I have a hand raised by committee member Hayes Livesay.
I mean, I will say that I am in agreement with what I believe to be the spirit of comment 4, meaning that putting a 5% cap on the one-time payment probably is a small number and really tends to incentivize an amortization approach instead. That being said, if it's going to kill the overall deal to take that 5% cap off, I just don't think it's worth it. I think everyone can just go with the amortization approach instead if they really want to make an agreement. I think that there are a few landlords who are going to say, oh, sorry, if only you could do the one-time payment, I would agree to this, but since we have to do it over time, I can't. I think that will be an unlikely and infrequent experience, but I think lifting the cap would be cool. However, I'm concerned that there would not be broad support for that, and I'd like to see these regulations passed. So that's my thoughts there.
Okay. Like I said, a motion is still available on the floor.
I guess I'll make a motion.
Oh,
oh no, go Matt, go Matt, go Matt, go Matt.
You can do it, Matt. Come on.
You beat me to it. You beat me to it. You got it.
No, go. No, go.
Sure, I'll make a motion, although I don't have, it may be better for Nicole. The text, I can't find the text that you said need to be read to make the motion, Emily, so.
Staff, can you share that on the screen? It should be from the staff report.
Karen, can we go with the simplified?
Yep. I mean, so we have a resolution. The resolution is a resolution of the Rental Housing Committee adopting amendments to regulations, Chapter 6, upward adjustment of regulations. So it would be fine to just move adoption of the amendments to Chapter 6.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt the amendments to Chapter 6.
You have a motion by committee member Grunwald. Do we have a second?
I will second.
All right, we have a second from committee member Haynes Livesay. Miss Andrea, can you give us a roll call vote?
Sure. All right, we'll start with committee member Pardo Dizella.
Aye.
Committee member Haynes Livesay.
Aye.
Committee member Grunwald.
Aye.
Vice Chair Almond.
Nay.
Chair Ramos.
Aye.
Right, motion passes 4 votes to 1, sorry.
We finally did it, y'all. Congratulations. All right, so let's move on. We're going to skip 8.3 and 8.4 to council staff committee reports. So we have a staff presentation on monthly activity report, February 2021.
Good evening, committee members. I'm sure, ready to stop hearing me talk. We have an update on the monthly status report for February of 2021. And this is just a high-level overview. We'll do the in-depth one for the end of the quarter, which is next. Will be presented at the next committee meeting. So we had 576 public inquiries made. We will see a difference in a substantial increase in this number in March, because we will be reporting on all of the work your CSFRA rent stabilization program staff does with public inquiries as well. Right now, this information is only compiled from the Mountain View Rental Housing Helpline. So just keep in mind that next month, this will look substantially different because you'll be receiving our data for the first time. We have 21% of all inquiries were in need of bilingual support. And as far as public inquiry topics go, right now, you still see other CSFRA topics as our biggest bucket here. That has to do right now with landlord registrations primarily. And we are receiving quite a few inquiries about eviction protections and rent relief and people who are unable to pay rent related to COVID-19. We've held 20 workshops through the end of February, and this does not include our eviction moratorium workshops. And we've had 166 attendees. All of this has been virtual. We've held 31 clinics. We held them every Friday now. Our office hours are every Friday. And we will have our first one tomorrow in the morning for small property owners. So we do have some people signed up. So we're hopeful that we'll get some more contact with our small property owners this way. We've pushed out 3 mailings and had 23 email updates this year so far, 11 Mountain View voice ads, and we've reached 550 contacts through our email subscribers. There have been 86 mediations and conciliations, with 75% of those being resolved. We have 7 that are still pending. For required noticing, we've received 418 termination notices. The bulk of those are failure to pay rent notices. Again, this is, you see that increase there because the eviction moratorium before Q2 of 2020-21 restricted landlords from giving those notices, and they have to give them now for their tenants to be covered by the statewide eviction moratorium. We've received we've had 10 families that have received assistance for tenant relocation in 2021 so far, and these are for projects that have been in the works and happening for quite a while. There have been no new projects in 2021. We have some petitions that are still outstanding and being processed, going through the remand process right now on that appeal that you heard last month. And for the market conditions, as you can see here, things are kind of flattening out. We're no longer seeing increases in vacancy rates, and we are starting to see a slight uptick in average monthly rent again. So things are kind of leveling out right now in terms of volatility in the market, and that's expected to continue or anticipated to continue as more things open back up. We've had a few units that have sold and a few properties that have sold this past fiscal year. However, nothing compared to what we saw in the past before SB 330. And there are 3 properties on the market. For our MNOI Consumer Price Index, you can see here that there is, as mentioned when reviewing the Consumer Price Index in the past, there is more volatility in the market for the rent index. It has stabilized, for lack of a better word. It's not dropping substantially, but it's also not increasing at this time like we had seen it increase in the past. And we do want to mention that a newsletter, 4-page newsletter, I only included the main 3 pages, not the back in this, went out to all of our landlords, and it gives comprehensive information about noticing requirements, resources, our rent registry portal and property registration, the statewide eviction moratorium, the COVID-19 rent relief programs, including the ones from the state and the county that are currently being rolled out, which we'll provide a brief overview for, and our virtual workshops and office hours. As you can see on this list, there are quite a few coming up, and we will go over them in more depth, including that coffee catch-up that we're having tomorrow. And Andrea, I'm going to pass it over to you for a second.
All right. So I just wanted to talk just briefly about the rent registry and the fees, because we are still sort of in the middle of trying to get the word out and get people to register their properties online. But to date, we've had a total of 239 properties register, so that it's about 34% of our CSFRA covered properties, and that makes up over 6,000 of our units. So that's 44% of our total units. So you can see, since last time we gave the numbers out, some of our bigger properties have finished their registration and submitted that to us. Since we've had the deadline pass and we've sent out the newsletter, we've had about 60 properties complete registration submitted since our last rental housing committee meeting. So I think those two things really gave people a push and a reminder to submit their registrations. We have 17 properties that are registered as exempt, and those are mostly our government subsidized properties, with just 1 or 2 being properties that were built after the CSFRA went into effect. And then just a quick note here on how many fees we've collected so far. So we have $1,075,000 so far collected, which is about 85% of our fees. So as usual, we're doing well in that department. And we are still working with our finance department to update incorrect addresses and send out any delinquent reminders to people. But we are not charging any late fees at this point.
Questions?
Any questions on that?
I do have a quick question. Are we getting fees paid by people who still haven't registered? Like we do have some sense of contact information for them. Have they given a reason, or we just have been unable to get a response?
So definitely we've had fees paid by people who haven't registered. And we do, of course, send out it mentions it in a couple of places on the fee invoice itself, and we send out sort of like an information sheet with the invoice that mentions it. So they get it kind of twice in the same spot. I haven't had any contact with any landlords who are just flat out refusing to do it. I'm thinking it's more that they're not reading the information that we're providing there. So we were hoping that maybe the newsletter, providing the information in different ways, right? Newsletters, we've sent out postcards, so different things to try to catch people's attention is what we're trying to do. But a lot of the people, we only have a mailing address. We don't have email or phone numbers to reach out to them. So we're limited somewhat in that way that we can reach out.
Are there any other questions from other committee members? All right, I have one more question for Ms. Andrea. At what point do you think that we should start adding a little bit more teeth to the compliance aspect?
I know we had this discussion with you all, I can't remember exactly when, and we sort of landed on, at least for the fee, that we would send out just sort of a gentle reminder notice, and we will start adding in that 1% a month fee for the invoices not being paid through our finance department. But at this point, that's all we have permission to do from the committee. And I think we're, at least for the fee, you know, we're getting to a point where a lot of landlords, it's been around for a while, so I think it might be something you would all want to consider again. And I know at least for property registration, we're still really trying to get the word out and push that this is something that is required, since that is very, very new. And it is a little bit of a bigger push for our landlords. So we're still working really hard for the registration to try to get that information to people.
Okay. So we have questions from committee member Grunwald.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering, Andrea, where for last year, where did we net out on percentage attainment, I guess, of fees paid?
Oh, at 90, mid 90s.
Okay. And to some of the 85, are they also, we've been recording the 1% fee for some landlords since last year?
Yes.
I guess how much of that 85?
Of
I
the
would assume
current,
the portion who haven't paid from last year still haven't paid this year.
so the 85 is just looking at the current year fee payment. So that's not taking into consideration any of the past years, people who have not paid. But we are, if they haven't paid last year, when we're sending out our delinquent notices for them this year, we're including their prior bills. And those are accumulating late fees. But I haven't pulled those numbers.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would be open, as other members have mentioned, I'd be open to figuring out how we're going to handle that.
We have a question by committee member Haynes Livesay.
On the registration in the database, I believe we said, and I could be wrong, it's late, so if I'm wrong, just correct me. I believe we said that was going to represent non-compliance and impact the ability to take the AGA after March 1st.
That's correct.
Have we thought about ensuring, I'm trying to think of how to do this, but I feel like we get a bit of press coverage in the agenda leading up to the setting of the AGA every year. So maybe this could be a prominent thing in the agenda that you won't be able to take the AGA, and maybe we could just re-review that and use the agenda to publicize that fact so that folks that are just like, oh, database, I don't want to deal with it, realize that there are repercussions and take care of it before it becomes a situation where they can't take their AGA and they didn't realize that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good idea. And it's important for both landlords to know that and tenants to know that. So we've been mentioning that when we're mentioning registration in general, because our program really is complaint-based in a way. So we're not going to know unless the tenants even know that this is something that's not allowed, right? So they can't bring it to us otherwise.
And
Exactly.
the staff is planning in our June newsletter, which usually has the AGA in it, to make sure that information is stated. We always include in that section, this is what the AGA is going to be, and you can't have your rent increased if you're not in compliance with the law. Your unit's not in compliance with the law. So hopefully that will help too, and we'll add that into the list of reasons for non-compliance.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item?
Okay, we'll go on. Real quick, we're going to do a quick overview of these. Andrea, do you want me to cover these or do you want to cover them?
If you want to plow through them really quickly, that's fine with me.
All right, we'll go over it really quickly. As you know, there's an eviction moratorium in place. Does not end until June 30th. No one can be evicted for not paying their rent due to COVID-19 at this point. we've provided the details on that, so I'm not going to provide them again tonight. If you'd like to join us, we will have workshops covering this topic. We have 2 coming up next week, one on March 30th that is specifically geared toward landlords, and one that is specifically geared toward tenants. The tenant one is bilingual, and we will be providing information on the various rent relief programs that have just been released from the state and the county, as well as our own rent relief program through the city of Mountain View. And just to give a quick overview, as I mentioned, there is now, and this is on our website for the eviction moratorium, there is now a California COVID-19 rent relief program for landlords to apply for. Tenants can apply for it as well. This program specifically helps very low income eligible households who are financially impacted pay for both past due rent and future payments for rent and utilities. Tenants and landlords are able to apply for the assistance through the program, and landlords and tenants can check their eligibility and apply at housingiskey.com, or they can call this phone number on the screen to learn more. Tenants must income qualify and be financially impacted by the pandemic. They have to make 80% or less of the area median income, but tenants who make 50% of the area median income or less are prioritized. So this is similar to the Mountain View program requirements. It's an extensive application. The landlord application part is 9 pages. The tenant application part is 36. So we definitely are providing information about this program, and we are hosting the small landlord catch-ups, and every office hour people that we have on Fridays, any landlord can come and join us, and we will help them kind of start the process rolling and see how we can help them as much as possible. Project Sentinel is doing a lot of work around this as well. The county is about to have a program too to help distribute $1.5 billion in rent relief. And that is for very low income eligible tenants. I think it's 30% of the area in median income or less. That program will be released. We're thinking we'll get more details out about it tomorrow from the Board of Supervisors meeting, and then we'll start being able to promote what their actual website is and application process is as soon as possible. So our materials are being updated to reflect these programs. Also, we have the Community Services Agency that has rent relief programs, including the City of Mountain View's COVID-19 rent relief program, and we're looking at some additional ways to assist in that application process for the Mountain View one. Tenants must income qualify. The rental assistance is paid directly to the landlord for these programs, and tenants who are interested need to email renthelp@csacares.org. Additionally, there's the homelessness prevention system, which provides rental and legal assistance for households at very high risk of homelessness. And the homeless prevention system is going to be the main distributor of that big bulk of funds that I just mentioned that the county will be distributing to tenants. So the federal monies cannot be distributed to governmental entities that are less than 200,000 people, which is why Mountain View won't receive its own allocation in funding for that big program. Tenants will have to apply through the county's portal. And San Jose would have received its own funding, but they decided to become part of this bigger county consortium with their funds. So every tenant that's eligible in the county will apply through that one portal. And then there is mortgage relief available for landlords. We actually have a HUD certified mortgage counseling workshop tomorrow at 3. So if you know anybody who needs assistance, please let them know that they can register for this workshop at mountainview.gov/RSP webinars. Again, actually it's at 4 o'clock, and we can go over those workshops coming up next. We still have the utility relief program for tenants who qualify. Any resident who qualifies actually in the city of Mountain View can receive that $50 one-time credit for those utility bills that the city covers. And then this is what our month of workshops looks like. In addition to those eviction, moratorium, and rent relief webinars, we're also running these workshops. Like I mentioned, we have the one at 4 o'clock tomorrow for mortgage counseling and financial assistance. We have one on Thursday at 3 for property registration. We have one on April 1st for rental protections in Mountain View that's seniors focused, and we have one on April 15th for maintaining habitability for landlords. And we have our virtual office hours every Friday from 1 to 3 p.m. and a virtual coffee catch up with small landlords tomorrow. It's at 10 a.m. and it will have assistance for that state rent relief application. And here's our contact information. And that's it for the evening. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions or hands raised. So thank you, Miss Patricia. And I guess if there's nothing else, I'm going to call the meeting to adjourn. So this meeting is adjourned at 10:06 p.m. The next Rental Housing Committee meeting is scheduled to be held on Monday, April 19th, 2021 at 7 p.m.